And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call. As tonight, your Indiana Hoosiers defeat SIU-Edwardsville 83-60 in a game where that final score really is not indicative of how much Indiana controlled this game. It was a sloppy final 8 minutes there for the Hoosiers as they rested all of the starters, but a really, really solid performance from Indiana. A game that started out a little bit shaky, as you might expect that it would, coming off that big North Carolina win, but the Hoosiers really played well for the rest of the first half after a shaky first few minutes. And we're going to break it all down for you on this episode of the Assembly Call. I'm your host, Jarrod Morris. I will be joined tonight by Andy Bottoms. Ryan has the night off, so we'll be sure to make several comments behind his back since he's not here to defend himself. But let's start out, as we always do, with our banner moment. And for me, the banner moment tonight came in the first half. There was a moment, you may remember, where Thomas Bryant and Deron Davis played together. And they actually got a few runs together in tonight's game. As obviously Indiana was without OG Anunoby, so there was more opportunity for Deron Davis to get in there, as Indiana's big man depth wasn't quite what it normally is. And there was a possession where, and we've seen this before, with Bryant and Davis playing a two-man game out on one side of the court. And Bryant had the ball out. Davis was posting inside. Bryant gave him a feed. Davis didn't have great position, so he threw the ball back out to Bryant. And Bryant was open enough. He could have taken a shot. And you could tell the SIU-Edwardsville guy wasn't quite sure, do I go out and defend Bryant because I know he can shoot? Do I need to stay back because he's done a good job driving into the lane? And meanwhile, Deron Davis is reposting, getting great position, and Bryant calmly dumped the ball right back into him. Davis took a couple of dribbles, turned around, made a beautiful little turnaround jump hook. And to me, it was just indicative of the incredible talent that this Indiana team has. And I think how effective that two-man game can be when you get those two guys on the floor on the same side, because Bryant has shown enough now. He already made his 6th three today, but he's shown enough now with his varied game, his multi-skilled game, that you have to respect that. And then with Deron Davis's ability to use that big wide base of his to get position and then to be patient enough to not force it, give it back to Bryant, and then repost and get position. I just thought it was a really fundamentally sound play in a game where it can be easy to kind of get sloppy and rush things. I was really impressed with that play, just the patience of it, the skill that it showed, and the fact that Indiana has that ability and can do things like that. Those are the kind of things that you have to do in an NCAA tournament run to win a national championship. And so that, to me, was really encouraging to see those two guys playing so well together out there on the court. So that is our Hoosier Proud banner moments. And, of course, tonight's banner moment, as always, brought to you by our friends at Hoosier Proud, an Indiana-based brand by Hoosiers for Hoosiers. Connor and the team at Hoosier Proud offer a line of T-shirts and accessories that are unmatched for anyone who wants a unique, stylish way to display their own pride in being a Hoosier. Check them out at HoosierProud.com and use the promo code ASSEMBLY to receive a 15% discount on your entire order. That's promo code ASSEMBLY to receive 15% off at HoosierProud.com. All right, let's move the ball, get some opening thoughts from Andy Bottoms. His Bottoms line brought to us by Bracketology.fm.
Well, I think two things stuck out for me tonight. One was, you talked a little bit about the struggles in the beginning of the game. I thought it was mostly just not hitting shots. It wasn't really, if you contrast this to some of the other games against lesser competition when they didn't look all that sharp or all that focused, I didn't feel like that was the issue tonight. And I think that was one of the things that we really wanted to see coming off that North Carolina game, where in that game it looked like they learned something from the loss to Fort Wayne. Would they learn something from the success that they had? And I thought they did. I thought overall in the first half they played well. They just didn't make shots at the beginning, but gradually pulled away. The other thing, we see sometimes in games like this that it's easy to fall in love with a three, feel like you can kind of shoot the ball from wherever you want. Certainly many of us have lamented IU not getting the ball inside very much. And the combination tonight of Jawan Morgan, Thomas Bryant, and Deron Davis combined for 43 points and 18 rebounds. And I think that's obviously a great sign on a number of fronts. Not a great sign for us based on Ryan's bold prediction on the radio show today, but otherwise a really good sign for IU going forward. I thought they really did make a more concerted effort to get the ball inside. Bryant struggled to finish around the rim a little bit, but you mentioned one of Deron Davis's moves. I thought he continues to do a good job of establishing position. Morgan more off the dribble, but a lot of those came off of putbacks and things like that. So I think it was good to see IU came into a game with a clear advantage, had a plan to take advantage of it and executed that. And I think there have been times when we have looked at the opposing roster and looked at the matchups and felt like there was something there and maybe didn't get as much out of it as you'd like to. So I thought tonight they really seemed to pick up that focus, and I thought those were, that and the overall focus at the beginning of the game and intensity they came out with were both good signs.
Yeah, Bryant only 3 of 11 from the field, and clearly that's one of his worst games from the field as a Hoosier, because we know how good his field goal percentage is. And I actually thought he came out early in the game and really struggled. Was a little bit hesitant when he got the ball in the post, got blocked a couple of times. And so I think he was one of the first Hoosiers to go to the bench. But when he came back in, I thought really, really played well for about a 4 or 5 minute stretch there where he was really active, got his hands on some balls. I think he had a steal or two. He had 3 block shots for the game. And he showed, his skill. We talked about the pass into Deron Davis earlier, but he ran the floor and got a bucket. Had another couple nice plays. And so, I think, and it was nice. He only had to play 24 minutes, and that's the other thing that really stands out. When you look at the box score, you had 3 Hoosiers play 24 minutes: Bryant, Blackmon, and Newkirk. And then Morgan played 20 minutes, but then you got 17 from Davis and 15 from Devontae Green. Robert Johnson only had to play 17. So it was nice to see some of those Hoosiers who obviously had to play a ton of minutes in that North Carolina game. And Tom Crean mentioned on the pregame show that Indiana was a little bit banged up. It wasn't just OG. There were several other guys who were banged up, who had really left it all out there on the court. And so it was nice to see those guys, not have to play quite as many minutes. But in terms of Thomas, your thoughts just on his overall game, because again, thought he struggled, but really, I really like to see him refocus after he got back in there. And the second half, I'm not really going to put a whole lot of stock into the second half, but I liked what I saw from him in the second part of the first half.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely noticed a different focus from him coming back in. It seemed like at the rim, there were just times when he would almost double clutch and give the other team a better chance to block his shot. So that seemed somewhat strange to me in terms of, instead of just trying to absorb the contact and get to the line, he did get there 4 times and made all 4. So I thought, yeah, he had some moments that were good, but I thought there was other times where he, as you said, he seemed tentative. And even, I guess you could apply tentative to, some of the double clutches and other things like that close to the basket. So I think when he really wanted to assert himself, he did a good job of that. Hit another 3 and did well in that regard. But I thought was definitely engaged on defense. Only ended up with 5 rebounds, although I would have probably guessed that was more. But, again, I think engaged on defense and, was really fired up when Deron Davis was playing well in the first half. So always good to see that from him, just as the emotional leader. But hard to read too much into this other than I think, a focus for him going forward will be how he's able to finish around the rim, because he definitely struggled in that area tonight.
A few numbers that stood out to me. I came in here on the halftime report, and I was a little disappointed in Indiana's offensive rebounding in the first half, because they only grabbed 35% of their offensive rebounds. And we know that when Indiana's playing how they want to play, they're getting 45% of their missed shots. They're turning those into offensive rebounds. And North Carolina held us to 25%. The first half, only 35%. I said I really wanted to see Indiana get that number up. And boy, they did. They finished at 45.5%. And about 8 minutes into the second half, the total for the game was at 50%. And a lot of that had to do with Jawan Morgan. And it was really great to see Indiana attacking the offensive glass, getting back to that, because they should dominate a team like this on the offensive glass. And you want to stay in that habit of getting nearly 50% of your misses. Turnover-wise, Indiana did a really good job in the first half. I think the turnover rate was 12% in the first half. It finished at 19, and I didn't check to see what it was at about the 10-minute mark when a lot of the starters stopped playing, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't at 19%. So I think the turnovers were better. Even just 19%, sadly, is an improvement on what we've been doing all season. But I think the improvement tonight was even better than that, which was nice to see. And that's the other thing that I really like to see was the free throw shooting. Indiana made their first 17. What did they finish for the game? They finished 20 of 23, so they went 3 for 6 after making their first 17. But, those are kind of the statistical things for me that stood out. Anything just looking at the stats for you from a team perspective that stands out?
I think the free throws, I think they actually hit the first 19 and went 1 of 4 in the last one.
Was it really?
I think they were 19 and 19 when Curtis Jones missed the first one of that. And then turnover-wise, just looking it up real fast here, they had 4 in the last 5 minutes and 13 seconds. So
okay.
I would agree with you. I thought they really took care of the ball well. Things got a little ragged there at the end, and that speaks to what you had mentioned at the beginning, that the 23-point margin didn't really tell the story. The other thing, this kind of goes along with what I said before. I mean, they took 22 threes out of 60 shots. probably below the percentage that they normally, kind of that ratio. The free throw shooting was absolutely something that stood out to me because that's something we've all talked about. Now, it's one of those where, well, that's great to make free throws in a game that you actually don't need them to win, and it's close, but I think at least a good thing, hopefully, to build confidence for the guys out there. And turnovers, as you mentioned, I thought was good. 17 second chance points compared to 5, 42 points in the paint. So more than half of the points coming around the basket. I thought that was good. And second straight game, only 4 fast break points. So that's 6 fast break points they've allowed in the last 2 games. So I think doing a good job in transition. Certainly easy on a night like tonight when you're scoring the ball well and the other team's taking the ball out of the net as opposed to off another play. But again, just I think positive signs from a defensive standpoint of really being able to get back and for the most part limiting easy buckets. And we can probably talk a little bit later about the defense. I thought that was the only thing on the defense. There were times when dribble penetration continued to be an issue, but overall far more good numbers than bad. And I think we've seen at times over the last few years where just playing an inferior opponent doesn't necessarily mean you're going to dominate in a bunch of areas on the stat sheet. But I thought for the vast majority of the categories that fans will look at, particularly with this team, they did really well and above and beyond what they've done earlier in the season.
All right, so we got to talk a little bit more about Jawan Morgan, even though Ryan has stripped the joy from that conversation, since it's also giving him kudos. I want to talk about him. I want to give James Blackmon Jr. some kudos for his play in the first half, and then also something underrated about our freshmen that I noticed tonight that I want to talk about. We're going to get to all of that here in just a second, but first, I do want to take a quick minute, tell you about our other sponsor, SeatGeek, who we're so excited to have back with us for a second season on the Assembly Call. As you have probably noticed, buying tickets online for sports and concerts has been a confusing process for a long time. It's hard to find the best deal for that game or show that you want to go to, and none of the older ticket sites really seem to want to change that. But SeatGeek is different. They've come along and they've created an amazing app and website that makes it easier than ever for fans to buy and sell tickets. That's why SeatGeek is always the first place that I go when I'm looking for tickets to a game or to a concert, because everything about SeatGeek is designed to make life easier for sports and music fans. They do the price comparison for you by searching multiple ticket sites and ensuring that you get the best possible deal. So basically, they do the work and you save the time and money. And best of all, Assembly Call listeners get a $20 rebate off their first SeatGeek purchase. So to get your $20 rebate on tickets, download the SeatGeek app, go to the settings tab and click add a promo code and add the promo code assembly, ASSEMBLY, and SeatGeek will send you $20 after you've made your first ticket purchase. Again, download the SeatGeek app and enter the promo code assembly today. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jarrod Morris here with Andy Bottoms, and we are breaking down Indiana's 83-60 victory over SIU-Edwardsville tonight at Simon Scott Assembly Hall. And Andy, I want to talk about the freshmen real quick, because I think, we talked about in our radio show earlier today that this was a really big opportunity for the freshmen with OG out, in a game against a team in the 290s in Ken Palm that you expect to dominate and really expect to be able to spread the minutes around, which you were. You thought this would be a game where Deron Davis would play more minutes, and he did with 17. And you thought Devontae Green and Curtis Jones and Grant Galen would get in there and get more minutes, and they did. And I tell you, the thing that really stood out to me, obviously, Deron Davis was terrific with 14 points, had some really nice offensive rebounds. I thought in terms of Curtis Jones, I was really impressed with the fact that he wasn't quite as shot happy and was really content to get his offense within the flow of the offense. Had 7 points, 3 of 5 from the field, but I was especially impressed with his passing. And obviously he had, the spectacular pass to Freddie McSwain for the alley-oop, but then a couple possessions later had a great pass to Deron Davis for a nice finish underneath. And Deron Davis had 3 assists. Had a terrific assist late to a cutting Grant Galen. And Devontae Green also had an assist. And I think the passing, passing is something that sometimes for young guys, you don't always see. And sometimes that can take a little while to come as guys get comfortable with the speed of the game, get comfortable seeing the floor. But I've been impressed. I think Curtis had 5 or 6 assists in the Mississippi Valley State game. And so this is something we've seen from him a little bit more lately. But just really impressed with the passing of these freshmen. Your thoughts kind of on that and just on their performance overall?
Yeah, I mean, Deron Davis had a really good pass out of the post for the Bryant three early in the second half, and just had a good idea. You could tell he knew exactly where he wanted to go with the ball once he got it. And I thought your point about shot selection was good for them, because I think Jones struggled with that a little bit, got caught up in the emotion of the game against North Carolina the other night. But those guys combined were 8 of 12 from the floor, so one didn't take a lot of shots despite the fact that they played a lot of minutes, and obviously based on the fact they made so many, we're taking quality ones at that. And so I think about 6 assists between the three of them, and other than Deron Davis, who had 3 turnovers, one of which was on a terrible offensive foul call. I thought they all played really well within the flow of the offense, and it's exactly what you want to see from this. We talked about this a lot earlier today on the radio show. Just these are great opportunities for these guys, and I thought tonight they really took advantage of that and played in a way that wasn't. That you could come into a regular, as if this isn't a regular game, but into like a normal game. And if you played the way that you played tonight, you'd really be doing the team a favor, as opposed to getting caught up in the, I can probably do whatever I want against this team, and didn't really do that, I thought. So really played within the flow, kept the ball moving, and I think was a good opportunity for them in game 1 of this 3-game series, where they're going to get chances to play minutes like they did tonight. And I thought this was a good first step to that, and hopefully a performance each of the 3 of them can build on.
Andy, Tim the Thriller Perler did enter the game at about the 10-minute mark, so you're forgiven if it didn't seem like a normal game. It's quite all right.
That's true. I think you called it an exhibition at some point earlier today when we were talking on the radio show. So I did. It
slipped out.
Yeah, well, it's easy to think of it that way. So I just wanted you to feel better by making a similar mistake.
Thank you. I want to talk real quick about James Blackmon Jr. Certainly his numbers are not going to jump out at you when you look at the box score. 10 points. He was only 2 of 10 from the field. But I thought he was really good in the first half, because I thought he found a way to contribute without scoring. And we haven't always seen that from him. Sometimes his willingness to play defense and his rebounding kind of ebbs and flows as his shots fall or don't fall. And I think we're seeing from him this year that I haven't felt like that at all. I felt like he's been pretty locked in no matter what, because he's had some games where the shots haven't fallen. Obviously, he's had some games where they have fallen. But I thought tonight, again, they didn't fall, but 6 rebounds. And what I really like about that is Tom Crean has made a point of saying a couple times recently on his radio show, on pregame shows, how he really wants to get rebounding from the guard position. And you love seeing that, from a guy who's supposed to be a leader, obviously a junior like Blackmon is, to take what the coaches are talking about and really put it into practice. And he did it against Carolina, when he led Indiana in rebounds with 9, and that was a big point of emphasis. And he came out and did it again today. He had 5 rebounds at halftime, I believe, and that led Indiana. And again, I'm not really judging these guys much on what happened in the second half, because, Indiana came out and started the second half, on a 12-9 run and then a 6-4 run. So, or 12-6 and then 12-9. So they really pushed the lead out at the beginning of the half, and then SIU-Edwardsville dwindled it down after that. But I thought the guys played really well there at the beginning of the second half. But I continue to be impressed with the little things from James Blackmon Jr., and I think that's a testament to his growth as a player and to a leader. Maybe not yet as a vocal leader, like we saw from Robert Johnson in the North Carolina game, but I think he's much more comfortable now as a leader by example in terms of going out and executing what the coach wants, and I think he should be given credit for that, because he's really come back from the injury and I think been a different guy this year.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, he had 5 rebounds at the half. The starting guards, the 3 of them had 10 of IU's 21 rebounds at the half. So that continues to be a focus, and particularly is going to be important if they play the 3 of those guys a lot together, as they did tonight and probably will with OG out. But I thought, he definitely did not seem to let his shot dictate how he played defensively. He did have a couple steals in the first half, and I thought generally seemed to be pretty focused on that end of the floor. And like I said, that was one of the things I was really watching for, not just from him, but from everybody. Of easy to walk into some of these games and feel like it's going to be easy to go and outscore the opponent and not get too worried about defense. But I really thought in the first half they forced a lot of turnovers early. As I look at the overall numbers, SIU-Edwardsville really didn't have hardly any turnovers in the second half, I don't think. But that was something IU really early on. I mean, they had, I think, 8 turnovers probably the first 8, 9, 10 minutes of the game. So really like to see that from them, and that was a team effort that he was a part of. So good to see him do that, and we can certainly save his makes for other games when they'll be more needed than they were tonight.
Yeah, and folks are discussing this in the chat. And by the way, make sure that you join. Go to assemblycall.com/join so you can join our free members chat that goes on during our postgame show at assemblycall.com/live. In a comment, I worry about James Blackmon Jr. disappearing when it matters. And I think that's a very valid fear to have based on his first couple of years at Indiana, because we certainly saw that he, would seem to kind of pad his stats sometimes against the Alcorn States of the world and maybe not show up in the big tough games. But man, has that been different this year, because he was huge against Kansas. He made some huge plays against North Carolina early and late in that game. And even the Fort Wayne loss, obviously he did not have a very good game, but it certainly wasn't for lack of trying. And you could almost fault him for trying to do a bit too much at the end of that game. But again, just showing his growth. And we talked about how important that was going to be coming into the season, for an Indiana team that needed to replace the offensive assertiveness and ability of guys like Yogi Ferrell and Troy Williams. And I think James is really showing that. I'm going to get to Jawan Morgan here in a second. I do want to make one quick mention, Andy, of the subject of your fan club, Robert Johnson. The most important stat to me in his entire stat line tonight is 17 minutes. Because I think he's one of the guys who left that North Carolina game a little bit banged up after really playing well. And tonight, a relatively invisible game for Rojo, 5 points, 3 assists, 3 boards, a couple of turnovers, had a bunch of fouls early. But I'm just glad he only had to play 17 minutes because obviously he's a guy that Indiana's going to need fresh, a guy that tends to get a little bit banged up as you go through the season. So I'm just glad he didn't have to play too much out there. And that, to me, that's what matters, because I think we've learned that we can trust him when it counts.
Yeah, I would agree. I thought the same thing. One of the foul calls probably disagreed with a little bit in the first half, but he was getting worked on multiple times in the second half of the Carolina game. I think Kareen mentioned on his appearance with Dan Dockage yesterday that he had been banged up. So I would agree with you. That's a pretty important number, and he did okay while he was in there. 2 of 6, did score 5 points, handed out 3 assists in 17 minutes, which was a good thing, and got out of there with. Hopefully without getting hurt any more than he was. And similarly for Josh Newkirk, I mean, he did play 24 minutes, only had 5 points, but I think he had the highest plus minus again. So still getting good play out of those guards, even though the scoring was a little bit more tilted toward the front court, as we talked about earlier. But I thought both those guys still, did some good things out there, and like everybody, didn't have to play a ton of minutes to do it.
Great stat for Josh Newkirk, 0 turnovers. Now, he got bailed out on a couple where he was driving pretty wildly down the lane. The ball actually knocked off the SIU-Edwardsville guy, but still, no turnovers in 24 minutes. Solid for Josh Newkirk. Let's talk about Jawan Morgan. And yes, credit to Ryan Phillips, whose bold prediction on the radio show was that Jawan Morgan would get back to playing like Jawan Morgan. And actually, I think we might even be able to deny Ryan, because frankly, Jawan Morgan played better than Jawan Morgan tonight.
Yes, I thought the exact same thing. So I like that we're on the same page here.
Okay.
This is a fair point.
We found our technicality. All right, you're done, Ryan, and you're not here to defend yourself. But really, I mean, Jawan, 18 points, 10 rebounds. And what was the most impressive thing to me is the ferocity with which he attacked the offensive glass, especially in the second half, because I think 4 of those offensive rebounds came in the second half. But, look, he got back to doing, and this is where we have to give Ryan credit. He got back to, well, forget giving Ryan credit. Let's give Jawan credit for actually doing it. But, obviously, we've been working with this positionless thing and him kind of, leading the offense from out top. And we're starting to see a little bit less of that and a little bit more of him doing Jawan Morgan things, going in offensive rebounding, taking the ball and driving assertively, to the lane to score and finishing. We've seen him struggle to finish. And tonight, 8 for 8 from the field. Which, part of that may just be the law of averages starting to work out in his favor, because it seemed like he was missing an inordinate amount of bunnies, and made a 3-pointer again tonight, which was great to see. And then just played really tough, aggressive defense. I mean, we thought before the season that he was going to have a breakout year. He's been a little bit up and down. Hopefully what happened tonight is a sign of things to come, because this is the Jawan Morgan that I predicted would win Big Ten Sixth Man of the Year. That's the guy that we saw tonight. And obviously he started because OG wasn't in there. But this is the Jawan Morgan that Indiana needs if it's going to win a Big Ten title, if it's going to compete for a deep run in March, because he just brings such a different element to this team when he's playing like he did tonight.
It's hard to imagine how much I would have enjoyed this performance from him even more had it not been for Ryan's prediction, but I'll have to just in my mind think about what that would have been like. But I thought, overall, he just played terrific. He we saw a little bit more of what he was able to do against Carolina, where he was more apt to put the ball on the floor, not necessarily as a facilitator in the sense of, running the offense as we've seen him do, but more in an attacking way and really trying to drive guys. And I think, you saw that again, even though SIU-Edwardsville didn't have a ton of size, it was a mismatch for him. And in the same way that he recognized those mismatches and took advantage of them against North Carolina on Wednesday, I thought he did the same thing tonight. And I think he's starting to figure out the balance of, where he needs to score and get the ball. And that's something we've talked about with a lot of these guys, is just trying to figure out where to play, where the balance of their shots needs to come from. And I think over the last couple games, he's really done a good job of being able to use his more perimeter or ball handling skills to be able to get to the basket in a way that isn't just facilitating offense, but it's really kind of attacking and creating for himself and not just everybody else. But I think we also know that he is a good passer, and he's going to be able to get other guys involved as he's able to do that more effectively. So I thought it was a terrific game. He was really relentless on the boards. As you said, he ended up with 4 offensive rebounds, 7 total rebounds in the second half, in which I don't think he even played, probably didn't even play 10 minutes in that half. And so I thought that was, played he had 7 rebounds in 7 minutes in the second half and 9 points. So not a bad second half showing from him, and just good to see him get that. And again, we talk about these games building confidence for some of the younger guys. I think there's something to be said for the way it can build confidence for some of the older guys as well, who maybe have been struggling a little bit. And I think a great sign for him, and hopefully he can keep that up on Sunday.
Let's talk defense real quick. SIU-Edwardsville finishes scoring 0.89 points per possession. Again, a number that is inflated because of the fact that they scored 21 points basically over the final 8 minutes of the game. What did you think of the defense? Because I thought in the first half, I thought it was pretty good. I mean, I thought there were some sequences in the first half where SIU-Edwardsville was a little bit too comfortable, dribbling and penetrating. But for the most part, I thought Indiana did a really nice job. And then I thought in the second half got a little bit lax. You saw them get, able to drive into the lane much, much easier. So that wasn't great to see. But overall, I thought, some of the growth that Indiana showed in that North Carolina game, we saw some of that. And certainly I thought, some of the interior defense and Thomas Bryant's ability to affect shots. Like I said earlier, he had 3 block shots. And we continue to see Deron Davis be a guy who can alter shots. Only had 1 block, but, again, played solid defense, altered some others. So I thought not a great defensive performance, but all things considered, I think there were some positive signs to take away.
Yeah, it was kind of a mixed bag for me. I think on the one hand, you look, only gave up 16 free throw attempts. SIU-Edwardsville, I think, was top 10 in free throw rate coming in. So good for IU to keep them off the line. I think they were right around 25% tonight, if the math in my head is correct. So I think that was a positive sign that they didn't really put them on the line. Didn't shoot the ball well at all. But I think the dribble penetration, which led to 32 points in the paint on a team that doesn't really have a lot of big guys and a lot of size, that feels like too many to me. As you said, I think there were times when they really did a good job of challenging shots and got a number of blocks, but I thought there was other times they really struggled to contain the dribble and let guys get there pretty easily. So that was really on a night when most things went right and most stats look good. I think that was one that stands out a little bit as I don't know that it's concerning, because it's hard to tell. It would be nice to go back and look at those numbers at certain points in the game and see how much that was impacted by kind of the garbage time element of it at the end. So that might be inflated a little bit, but certainly the penetration that they allowed at times was really the only thing that stuck out to me defensively that wasn't great. But I also thought, they played well enough defensively to really get out to a big lead and didn't give up a lot of points early. So how much of that is just, a little bit of a loss of focus in a game that they really came out and were focused to begin the game. It's a little bit tough to say. That's really the only. So I think our gripes are the same on that, but hard to read a ton into it, I guess.
All right, we've gone and buried the lead because obviously we haven't dissected the night that was for Tim the Thriller Perler yet. So we need to talk about that. And I have a quick, simple coaching tip for Zach McRoberts that I think will make him even more effective in the minutes that he gets. And we're going to get to that here in just a second. I do want to take a quick minute. I mentioned earlier, going to assemblycall.com/join, getting your free membership so that you can participate in our live chat. And I want to just take a couple minutes here and tell you why you should activate your free membership, because there's 3 reasons. Number 1, it's quick and easy because you can go to assemblycall.com/join and it takes you like 15 seconds to sign up. And again, it's free. And plus, it's how you get our best content. So by joining, you'll receive our 6-banner Saturday IU Hoops News Roundup, as well as our detailed post-game analysis emails. And actually, because this game tonight is a Friday night and tomorrow is Saturday, those two will be combined for you tomorrow morning in one giant, awesome, mega IU Hoops email, which we only do that to our email subscribers and our members. So you have to be on the list to get it. And also, it's just how you connect with us and how you connect with the community. We have a great moderated free members forum, plus our moderated live chat, and we'd love to see that continue to grow. And we want you to be in there conversing. So if you like what you hear on the Assembly Call, then becoming a member is the next logical step, and we hope that you will join us for free over at assemblycall.com/join. All righty, you are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I am your host, Jarrod Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms. We are breaking down Indiana's 83-60 victory over SIU-Edwardsville. And before we get to Tim Perler, Andy, obviously we have to talk about him. I want to discuss Zach McRoberts real quick because, again, he was able to get in there for 13 minutes. I thought he was effective as you expect him to be. He's never going to go out there and make a big boneheaded mistake. And he actually, got himself in the stat sheet a little bit more than normal tonight. 3 points, a couple of assists, a rebound, a steal, and just makes smart, heady plays when he's out there, which is why Tom Crean feels comfortable putting him out there and referred to him a couple of pregame shows ago with Fish as one of Indiana's 7 starters. That's how, Crean kind of has this way of thinking of 6 or 7 guys as quote-unquote starters, and he puts Zach McRoberts into that category. And frankly, if you remember back, I thought about actually using this for the banner moment for a while. Indiana really struggling offensively. Who was it that got Indiana off the schneid? Zach McRoberts knocking down a 3. And it was nice to see him step up and confidently make that shot. And that shot reinforced for me a point that I made a couple games ago, and I'm going to make it again right now, which is that Zach needs to present himself as a threat on offense. If you watch him, he gets the ball and he gets rid of it as quick as he can, like it's a hot potato. I mean, literally, he will receive the ball, and without even taking it and triple threading or looking at the basket, he's already looking for who he's going to pass it to, and he tries to get rid of it as quickly as possible. And Indiana wants to move the ball with the pass, and there's sometimes when you want to make a quick pass, but I feel like it undermines his ability to be a productive member of the offense because he's not even presenting himself as a threat. And defenses, they may not respect him, number one, just because he's not high up on the scouting report. But if he doesn't even show that he's going to look at the basket or look to drive, then they certainly don't need to respect him. And I think what he's shown is flashes of skill, making that 3, making some nice passes. He had a couple of assists, as I said. He's got some skills and the ability to do some things. I would just like to see him slow down a tick, gather himself when he receives the pass, and make the defense respect him for that split second so that they can't just automatically refocus on, where they're going to go and get kind of that half-step advantage, playing help side defense or whatever it is they're doing. So that, to me, is kind of the next step for Zach McRoberts. If he's going to continue to get these minutes, especially in bigger games, he needs to present himself as a threat out there on offense so that it's not basically Indiana playing 4-on-5 when he's doing that. Your thoughts on that point, and then just Zach's contributions overall?
Yeah, I thought I would agree with that. I think Alex Bozich said something on Twitter about that. There was a play, he was just wide open on the wing, and as you said, passed it so quick he didn't really even look at the basket, and so which was odd to me because he came in cold off the bench and didn't hesitate to shoot the one that he made. So a little bit strange in that regard. I think certainly has shown some ability over the course of these last few games to make threes and things like that. And so yeah, I would agree with you, just trying to make the defense respond. But I also think he becomes somewhat of a stabilizing force. He was the guy that Crean went to first off the bench. And I think just to, kind of settle guys down, he had, understands his role very well. And even if you kind of look at some kind of ratio of plus minus to minutes played, he played 13 minutes and they were plus 12 when he was on the court. So I think, continues to be a positive factor, had 2 assists in his time out there. And part of that speaks to him just, being able to move the ball. But I would agree with you that he could do some things there. Couple quick things I saw on Twitter about Jawan Morgan to circle back to that. Jeremy Price, Jawan Morgan getting an offensive rhythm. Just mentally, I've been thinking too much about shooting. And that certainly got easier for him tonight as he got a lot of easy looks around the basket and some putbacks. And then the other was Teddy Bailey, Morgan on OG. When somebody goes down, we all have to step up collectively. We all have to do that for him. I think one of the things that Crean has, preached from a leadership standpoint is, really playing for one another and having that accountability for one another. So while those are words in the sense of the post game. I think his actions tonight back that up. So I think a good sign, hopefully, in that regard from a leadership perspective.
Well, and we've talked so much about leadership, and he, to me, has always seemed like one of the most obvious candidates to step in and fill that role. And I know it can be a little bit tough when you're only a sophomore, but, considering there's no seniors out there playing, and it's not like James Blackmon Jr. and Robert Johnson are the most natural leaders, Jawan, of all the guys on our team, seems to have the most natural leadership ability. And I think maybe it's been a little bit hard for him because he struggled a little bit, because obviously it helps to lead when you're playing well and you're feeling comfortable. And if you're worried about your own game, it's a little bit harder to to be focused on everybody else sometimes. And so hopefully this is the kind of game that builds that momentum for him, not just, producing in the box score, but also his ability to lead. Because, the comments that you just made, those are the comments of a leader. And that's great to see from Jawan, who's just going to continue to be a more and more important part of this team as the season moves forward. Okay, we have to talk about Tim Perler real quick, Andy, because we don't get the opportunity to very much on this show. But this is a night when, he got 6 minutes of action. He was in there at the 9.5-minute mark, did get 4 rebounds. And look, we talked about this a little bit on our radio show, and I brought it up, and you guys laughed at me a little bit, and I get the last laugh because Tim did get in there. But my point was, look, Tim Perler is on scholarship, and he's a guy who's 6'9", 6'10", and he certainly has to have some skill to still be on the team, to have gotten a scholarship. And the way I looked at it, you got a guy in OG who's 6'8", who goes down. Hartman's already out. We're depleting our front court depth. Now we have Thomas, Deron Davis, Jawan Morgan. At what point can we say, hey, maybe Tim Perler comes in for 4 or 5 minutes and plays? And I know that seems kind of ridiculous because when he gets in there, it's more of a sideshow than anything. And that's not necessarily his fault. It's just this narrative that has run amok. And, so he got in there tonight, and I think like he always does, he hustles, he plays hard, he got some rebounds, and it was nice to see. And, maybe he is never a guy who in a game against a team that's higher than 290th in KenPom is able to get in there. But I do think, and I want to see if you agree, isn't it fair to start expecting that now as he is in his junior year? I don't think it's ridiculous to say you've got a 6'9" guy on the bench. Why isn't he able to get some, some serious minutes? If you have these two guys in your front court who are out, that seems like a reasonable thing to expect for me, for us as fans, for a guy who's on scholarship. And I don't know if we'll get there, but, at least when he got in there tonight, he was able to do some things with his minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I think from an expectation standpoint, that's probably fair. I think from a usage standpoint, I would struggle to believe that he's going to be used any differently than what he has been so far. But tonight he certainly was running the floor hard and did a good job, and 4 rebounds and a block shot. So certainly was playing hard. And for as much as I am the chairman of the Robert Johnson fan club, I think Homer Drew has firmly entrenched himself as the Tim Perler fan club chair at this point. I'm not sure. I think he would have jumped over the scores table if he had scored and just run out and given him a hug. I don't really know, but that was an interesting storyline for the last 9 minutes. Listening to Homer Drew just fill time with Tim the Thriller out there. Instead of actually using like the part of his name that rhymed, he kept calling him like Tim the Thriller. It was like, you can't just say like Thriller, Priller, or like any of that together. He used
there was an evolution because he called him Tim the Thriller, and then it was Prilla the Thriller, and then it was just straight Tim Thriller. Like he just straight up removed the last name and just went with Tim Thriller. It was an excellent little subplot that made the final 10 minutes of the game entertaining.
That was the only thing that really, I mean, that and the fact that I had to do the show was really the only thing that kept me hanging on during those last few minutes. So we talked with Alex earlier in the week about how we do post-game shows like this. This was one, after games like this was one way that you have to find ways to entertain yourself about what's going on the court. So that was a good way.
I will say, I mean, we've all kind of been dreading this 3-game stretch, just knowing, obviously 2 and 3 days and the competition not very good. But I'll tell you, the injury to OG has made these games a little bit more interesting. Then that's kind of what you look for in games like this, is just what are kind of the storylines, what are the things to follow. And it was just, and I think seeing, okay, Indiana has the big win against North Carolina. What's the maturity level of this team? The important lesson that needed to be learned after the Fort Wayne game, was that learned? And I think what you saw from Indiana after struggling for the first 3 or 4 minutes and digging in even harder, playing even better after that for the final 16 minutes of the first half, it was quite clear that the lesson that needed to be learned was learned, and that was good to see. So
I mean, IU's got 3 games in the next 3 weeks against teams from the Ohio Valley. So you got to set the tone in the first one if you're really going to make a run at that OVC championship. So tonight was a good first step to that.
that is right. That is right. Let's look ahead real quick. Sunday, Indiana plays Southeast Missouri State is the first one, right? And then Houston Baptist is next week, I believe. What can you give us any insight on Southeast Missouri State real quick that we should look for? Is there anything worth noting about them?
I mean, just in kind of looking over the stats on KenPom, one thing we talked about rebounding tonight. They're 27th in defensive rebounding percentage, so that'll be an area to watch for, which is fairly impressive because they're in a similar way to SIU-Edwardsville tonight. They don't have a lot of size. I think when I looked earlier, they don't really have a rotation guy over 6'7". So those were things, and I guess something to look at is defensively they're 72nd in turnover rate for. So that'll be something to watch for, as it always is something to watch for with IU. But they haven't really shot the ball all that well, particularly from 2-point range. Not a lot of great numbers on the offensive end from them, and they have allowed some pretty gaudy. They're 285th or worst against both 2-point and 3-point shots. Got a couple guys that are 2 leading scorers are both seniors, so I think that helps a little bit as you just start to look at more. Obviously, they may not have a ton of experience playing at a place like Assembly Hall, but at least having some experienced players will potentially help stabilize them a little bit. But I think they're picked to finish right around the same place as SIU-Edwardsville in the Ohio Valley. They're in the same division there, so I don't know, not too much to watch for. I think the rebounding and turnovers, I guess, if you're looking statistically, will be interesting just to see how IU can do there, because one is an area where they have excelled, and it's kind of at least from a numbers standpoint, a strength on strength, and the other an issue or an area where they've had trouble with in terms of turnovers. So will be one that hopefully we see what they were able to do early in the game tonight, where they really did a great job of taking care of the basketball, particularly in the first half.
It's interesting. Let's have a little fun with KenPom numbers here. We kind of, and let me just ask you, Andy, pop quiz: who has the highest offensive rating on Indiana after tonight's game?
Oh boy. I have the page up, so this is a real test of my my integrity to not scroll down and actually look at the answer to this question. Robert Johnson was pretty close to it.
He was, and he's up there.
I bet it's Jarrod Davis.
No, it's Jawan Morgan.
Dang it.
Actually, and Jarrod Davis is second. He's at 126.8, and he's actually moved himself up into the significant contributor category because he's now using 22% of possessions. But Jawan, which is just interesting for perspective, and I don't recall how much I don't know what it was before the game, but we talk about how much he's been struggling. But he goes out, has one good game, and he's leading Indiana in offensive rating. His offensive rebounding percentage is 14.9%, which is 41st in the country, just outstanding, and he's ranked in defensive rebounding percentage as well. And he's doing a terrific job. He has the lowest turnover rate on the team. He's one of 3 guys who has a block rate of 3.9 or greater. Shooting well from the free throw line. Obviously, an 8 for 8 from the field is going to improve your 2-point percentage. But I think it just goes to show, it shows, kind of small sample sizes and maybe, the folly of looking at numbers after 5 games and how much can change after 1 game, but also just perspective, because Jawan probably wasn't playing quite as bad as it felt. It's just that our expectations coming into the season with kind of where the hype went and what we had seen of him in those exhibition games, it made our expectations so high. And I think tonight what was great is he lived up to all of those, and it was nice to see. But yeah, I was kind of surprised when I saw that he's the leader in offensive rating, and obviously India has a lot of guys ranked highly in offensive rating, but Jawan's sitting there at the top, which is impressive.
I guess breaking news: not missing a shot, really good for your efficiency rating.
Yeah, that was a much quicker way to say what I just said. Hey, there's one guy that we didn't talk about, and we're going to talk about him real quick before we get to our last call. And also, before we get to the last call, one more quick reminder that a great way to support the Assembly Call is by ordering your official Assembly Call t-shirt from HoosierProud.com. Go to HoosierProud.com and check out their selection of unique, stylish apparel that anyone with Indiana roots will love. And don't forget to use the promo code Assembly for 15% off. That works for our Assembly Call logo t-shirts and anything else that you buy. Again, the URL is HoosierProud.com. You are listening to the Assembly Call. I am Jarrod Morris here with Andy Bottoms, and we are wrapping up our breakdown of Indiana's 83-60 victory over SIU-Edwardsville. Andy, the one guy who played a few minutes that we didn't mention is Freddie McSwain, the birthday boy. It is his birthday today. Happy birthday to Freddie McSwain. Had a tremendous alley-oop. This is the second straight game that Indiana's had a huge highlight reel alley-oop on that great pass from Curtis Jones. But what I liked about what Freddie did, and I don't have the numbers in front of me. I don't know what his numbers ended up as. But again, I'm not too worried about when it was all the backups in there. What I liked was when he was in there with starters, Freddie did what he needs to do, which is not be a guy who uses a lot of possessions, not a guy who takes a lot of shots, but a guy who gets rebounds, gets his offense through putbacks, and hustles. And he did that because I know at one point I looked and he had 4 points on only one field goal attempt. He also made a couple of free throws, had 3 rebounds, was out there hustling. That's what you want to see from him because he's the other guy now with OG out, and if OG has to be out for an extended period of time, is Freddie McSwain a guy who can come in and give you 5 or 6 minutes a game? And if he's out there chucking up shots like the one game where he took 9 shots, he's not going to be able to do that. But I thought tonight played much more within himself. And if he will play like he did tonight, he is a guy to me that can go out there and give you a couple minutes in a sprint to give a guy a break, maybe before a TV timeout, something like that, and can be useful, which would be a really nice development as, once we get into Big Ten play.
Yeah, I mean, he really did a little bit of everything. 4 points, 3 rebounds, a block, and a steal, and a couple turnovers in his time on the court. So I thought he, definitely played more under control. And even when we saw one of those games earlier in the year when they were playing a lesser opponent, and he just, took the opportunity and took a bunch of shots. I mean, he did take a 3 late, but I thought overall did a much better job of trying to do those little things. And again, it's like you want to, if you want to treat this game like a practice in some regard, you want to practice how you want somebody to play. And I thought, the way he played tonight is a way that he can be effective in those short spurts for IU as he, gets some of the rust off from, not being able to do as much conditioning wise in the offseason. First, just getting on campus late, second with the knee surgery. So I think, for him to be able to shake some of that off while also, getting used to playing with the guys and doing some things there. I thought it was a good outing for him on his birthday. So can't complain about that.
One more number, by the way, on KenPom that jumps out to me, especially when you compare it to last year's team, is if you look at this year, there's only one guy who's considered a quote-unquote major contributor, as Ken Pomeroy denotes that, which is a guy who uses 24 to 28% of possessions. Do you know who the only guy is on Indiana's roster who uses more than 24% of possessions?
I would have actually. I did scroll down as you were talking about this, but I think I would have known because he's been up there for the last few games because of that one game that I mentioned where he took a bunch of shots. So yeah, Freddie is still that guy, but yeah. but probably worked his way down a little bit after tonight's game.
Yeah. Freddie using 26.6% of possessions. But here's the thing. Indiana then has 5 guys in that significant contributor category using between 20 to 24. Thomas Bryant, James Blackmon, Robert Johnson, Curtis Jones, Deron Davis. No one lower than 20.9%. No one higher than 23.7%. And you look at that compared to last year when Yogi Ferrell used almost 25% of possessions. Troy Williams used 26.3% of possessions. James Blackmon Jr., before he got hurt, was using 27% of possessions. And we should probably define what that means, Andy. But using possessions, what is the actual definition of that? I mean, it's basically how many possessions you use that end in a shot or that basically end in you using that possession. A made shot, a missed shot that doesn't result in an offensive rebound or a turnover, right?
Turnover, yeah, I believe so. I'm not sure how. I'm trying to think how assists actually factor into that. They may not factor into it at all. I'm not sure. I need to get to the KenPom glossary here somewhere. But the things that you mentioned are the big ones.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that, is last year Indiana was a team that was so dominated by Yogi and Troy when they were out there on the court. Robert Johnson only used 17% of possessions last year. This year he's using 21% of possessions, and I think in a way, look, there's an upside and a downside because I think you probably are able to pull out that Fort Wayne game if you have guys like Yogi and Troy who can just kind of take over, go get you buckets when everything else is struggling. Indiana wasn't able to do that night. But I think maybe you're better equipped to beat Kansas and North Carolina when you have such a balanced attack and where you don't know where it's going to come from. Do you buy that at all? I mean, I feel like that may be because there's a clear difference, in the balance of this year's team and last year's team. And I'm wondering if that has something to do with Indiana's ability to win these big games.
Well, it was interesting. I mean, that was one of the things that really stood out to me against North Carolina was that, that so many guys had played well and contributed. I think There is the flip side of that, where I think some people still have questions about when you really need to go get a bucket, who's that guy? And that was certainly easier to understand last year than it would have been this year. So it's kind of a double-edged.
Blackmon's done it twice now.
He has done it. Like
Carolina.
Yeah, if anybody's been that guy, then it's most certainly him. But I do think, then there was the Fort Wayne game where people would probably argue, he tried to do too much and really kind of overdid it and things like that. So yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways to look at that. I don't view it as a bad thing. I think, again, roles as the season goes on will sort themselves out. I think you're absolutely right that, if you had to pick somebody right now and you had to guess who was going to go out and take a big shot, if, coming out of a timeout at the end of a game, I think we would all assume that would be James Blackmon, and that probably is how it will shake out over the course of the season. But I think as long as they have that, it really keeps defenses on their heels in terms of knowing who to really try to shut down. And so if they can continue that, I think that's a good thing. Shows good balance overall, and because guys have different skill sets that are in that in that group of players, it doesn't really allow the defense to focus not only on one guy but on one part of the court that they're really trying to stop.
Yep. All right, Andy. Well, a nice win for Indiana, 83-60. Obviously, again, in games like this, you just don't want to get anybody hurt. You want to get your starters rest. Indiana was able to do that. So let's wrap things up. Any final thoughts for last call?
I think just was impressed that they came out and really seemed focused early on. Would certainly have been easy with a quick turnaround after a big game to lose some of that focus. And I think that you could make the argument that happened in some of the lower games earlier this year, and certainly in the Fort Wayne game. And so we talked about after that game, it's all about, that loss will be as valuable as what this team seems to learn from it. And so far, both based on how they played against North Carolina and how they played tonight, I think they seem to have learned some lessons from that. And we can only hope that continues on Sunday with another quick turnaround. But after that, it'll give them a little bit of a break, because I think it's not till the following Saturday that they play. So it's kind of had this, slog of games this week. But I think get through this one, get them a little rest, as I think finals will probably be cropping up there on campus. But a good start to this next kind of mini 3-game stretch, as we've talked about this season, as kind of these big games interspersed with stretches of games against lesser competition. So I think all the things that we would have said we wanted to get out of this game tonight, they did with a win. Guys not playing a ton of minutes, and some of the newcomers being able to get a lot of time on the court. So in that regard, I think a victory in more ways than one.
Yeah, it's been a lot of games in a short period of time for Indiana. But, as we sit here now, Indiana doesn't play another weekday game until Monday, December 19th, when they take on Delaware State. So, obviously, Sunday against Southwest Missouri State, a game that starts at 4 Eastern, by the way. I know early schedules had that as a 6 o'clock start, but it's going to be at 4 Eastern because it's going to be on ESPN2. And then Houston Baptist on Saturday the 10th, and then another week off, and Butler on the 17th. So it'll be really interesting to see if OG Anunoby is ready. And we kind of forgot to mention this, so I'll use this for my last call. But listening to Tom Crean on with Fish, and Fish kind of relaying some comments from OG, and then just kind of what people said watching him move around with the boot, I feel a little bit better. Now, none of us know, exactly when he's going to be back, but I'm not quite as pessimistic that, because to me, I was kind of just expecting that he was going to be out for the Butler game based on, seeing him go down and how much trouble he had walking last night. But it seemed, I know he told Fish, hey, I want to play this weekend. And Fish said, that's probably not going to happen. But Crean sounded pretty optimistic, so we'll see. There's certainly no reason for him to play before that Butler game on the 17th, so we'll see. Obviously, Indiana was a much different team with him playing at about 10% of his normal self against Fort Wayne, and that to me was the other nice takeaway from tonight, is that Indiana looked like itself without OG. Now, again, you got to make the caveat of the level of competition, but as Jawan Morgan said, or Tom Crean said about Jawan Morgan, he was out there rebounding for 2 guys tonight. That's what you got to do when guys are out. You got to step up. And I thought, starters played well. Guys came in off the bench and played better in their roles. That's exactly what you have to do. So an encouraging night for Indiana, a great way to put another good performance right back to back with that excellent win over North Carolina. And now we'll see if they can do it again on Sunday against Southeast Missouri State. We will be here, as we always are, with another episode of the Assembly Call IU Postgame Show. We hope you will join us. So have a great weekend until then, and we will talk to you after IU Southeast Missouri State. Go Hoosiers.